businessman laughs at those trying to restart the engine until a 6-year-old boy surprises everyone. Robert Harrison watched with a mocking smile as 3 experienced mechanics sweated over the old engine that had stopped working the previous Monday. The green rusted machine sat in the center of the community garage in the Oakwood neighborhood, and the operation of the water pump supplying the entire area of Chicago depended on it. "You're wasting your time with that junk," Robert said loudly, adjusting the knot of his expensive tie. "You should just send it to the junkyard already. When I build my parking lot here, you'll thank me for having a modern space." The residents gathered around the garage lowered their heads. It had already been 4 days without running water, and the water trucks were charging outrageous prices that many retirees couldn't afford. Robert was the new owner of the land where the garage stood, and he had bought it with the clear intention of demolishing everything. "Mr. Robert, you can't do this to us," pleaded old Charlie, one of the oldest mechanics. "This engine has been running for 40 years. It just needs a little adjustment." "40 years is too long, old man. Dinosaur technology," Robert replied, laughing loudly. "Look at all these people wasting time on a machine that belongs in a museum." It was then that a small boy timidly approached. Ethan was only 6 years old, with messy brown hair and a beige t-shirt that was slightly too big for his thin frame. He held a small screwdriver in his right hand and stared intently at the engine. "Can I try?" he asked in a soft voice barely above a whisper. Silence fell over the garage for a few seconds. Then, nervous laughter broke out among the crowd. Robert was the first to burst into loud laughter, doubling over. "Look at this. The little boy wants to play mechanic," Robert said, wiping a tear from laughing so hard. "How adorable. Where are your parents, kid?" "I live with Grandma Dorothy," Ethan replied, not taking his eyes off the engine. "She's right there in the window watching me." Everyone looked up. In the second-floor window of an old brick building, a gray-haired woman waved discreetly. Mrs. Dorothy was 68 years old and respected by everyone in the neighborhood. "Kid, this isn't a game," old Charlie said kindly. "This engine is complicated. Even we who've worked on it for decades can't figure it out." "Grandpa Walter taught me," Ethan replied, taking a step forward. "Before he left, he told me this engine has a special secret." Robert laughed even louder, drawing the attention of passers-by on the street. "A special secret? How ridiculous! Kid, go play with your toys and let the adults work." The boy wasn't intimidated. He approached the engine and began examining it carefully, as if searching for something specific. His small eyes scanned every part of the machine with a seriousness that belied his age. "Where have you already checked?" Ethan asked the mechanics. "Everywhere, kid," old Charlie replied, somewhat embarrassed. "We checked the ignition system, the fuel pump, the carburetor." "What about the heart?" Ethan interrupted. "The heart? What do you mean?" another mechanic asked. "Grandpa said every machine has a heart, and that this engine's heart is hidden in a place only he knew." Robert shook his head, visibly annoyed. "Enough of this nonsense. Are you really going to let a 6-year-old make fools of you? This kid is making up stories." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Ethan completely ignored the businessman and moved even closer to the engine. He placed his small hand on a side part of the machine and closed his eyes, as if feeling for something. "Here," he said, pointing to a section that looked just like all the others. "The heart is underneath here." "Son, there's nothing different about this part," said old Charlie. "We've already checked everything." "Not inside," insisted Ethan. "Grandpa said there's a secret compartment he made when he was young. He told me one day I'd need to know about it." The mention of his grandfather made Mrs. Dorothy, who had been watching from the window, hurry down the stairs. She reached the garage breathless, but with determined eyes. "Robert Harrison," she said, looking straight at the businessman, "you grew up in this neighborhood, drank water from that pump as a child. How can you want to destroy it?" "You must be confusing me with someone else," Robert replied coldly. "I've never lived in this area." "Liar!" exclaimed Mrs. Dorothy, stepping closer to him. "You're the son of Mrs. Margaret, who lived on the back street. You played with the kids here every day." "You're mistaken. I've always lived in upscale neighborhoods." Mrs. Dorothy opened her purse and pulled out a faded photograph. It showed several children playing around a water pump, and one of them had a face unmistakably like Robert's, just 40 years younger. "Recognize yourself now?" she asked, showing the photo to everyone. Robert turned pale but tried to keep his composure. "Any child can look like any other. This proves nothing." "It does," Mrs. Dorothy said firmly, "because the one who took this photo was my husband, Walter, the same man who built the secret compartment in this engine." The mood in the garage shifted completely. People began whispering among themselves, and Robert looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ethan, oblivious to the tension, kept examining the engine with total focus. "Grandma, where's the little lever Grandpa talked about?" the boy asked. "Look underneath, at the back. There should be a small star-shaped mark." Ethan crouched down and searched. After a few minutes, his eyes lit up. "Found it. There's a tiny star here." Everyone gathered to look. Sure enough, there was a small engraved mark on the underside of the engine, nearly invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. "Now press below the star and pull to the side," instructed Mrs. Dorothy. Ethan followed the directions. A small compartment opened, revealing a piece that looked like a miniature version of the engine itself. "That's the special regulator my Walter installed," Mrs. Dorothy explained to the stunned mechanics. "He said it protected the engine from overloads and kept everything running smoothly." "Then why didn't he tell anyone about it?" asked old Charlie. "He did. He told his best friend who helped install it, a boy named Robbie, who grew up right here in this neighborhood." All eyes turned to Robert, who was visibly shaken. His hands trembled slightly, and he loosened his tie as if struggling to breathe. I don't remember any of that," he stammered. "Of course you do," Mrs. Dorothy insisted. "You and Walter were inseparable. You spent whole days here in the garage, learning about engines. My husband always said you had a special talent for mechanics." Ethan held the small piece in his hands, examining it carefully. "This part is dirty. It needs cleaning before it goes back in." "Son, are you sure about what you're doing?" old Charlie asked, concerned. "Grandpa taught me. Every clean part works better." As Ethan carefully cleaned the piece with a cloth, Mrs. Dorothy handed him. The sound of an expensive car pulling up in front of the garage caught everyone's attention. An elegant woman stepped out of a white Cadillac, wearing a navy blue dress and high heels. "Robert, what are you doing here?" asked the woman, clearly surprised. "Jennifer," exclaimed Robert, even more flustered. "I was just handling some business matters." Jennifer was a woman around 40, with neatly styled blonde hair and a posture that spoke of refined upbringing. She glanced around the garage curiously, without showing the disdain her husband had displayed. "What an interesting place," she remarked. "It seems very community-oriented." "Yes, ma'am," replied Mrs. Dorothy politely. "We're all like family here." "Jennifer, let's go," Robert said quickly. "We have no business here." "Wait a minute," Jennifer said, stepping closer to Mrs. Dorothy. "Do I know you from somewhere?" "Perhaps," Mrs. Dorothy replied, studying the woman's face. "Do you have a teenage daughter?" "I do. Emily, she's 15. "Oh," Mrs. Dorothy exclaimed, clapping her hands. "You're the mother of the girl I helped when she was drowning in the community pool 2 years ago." Jennifer's jaw dropped. "That was you. My goodness, I searched for you for months to thank you. When I couldn't find you, I thought I'd never see you again." "Community pool," Robert muttered, confused. "Yes, Robert," Jennifer said emotionally. "Remember when I told you about the woman who saved our Emily? It was this lady right here." Mrs. Dorothy smiled humbly. "Any mother would have done the same. Your daughter is a lovely girl." "But how? Where?" Robert asked, still processing the information. "At the community pool here in the neighborhood," Jennifer explained. "Emily had gone with some friends. When she started drowning, this lady jumped in fully clothed to save her." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Ethan working on the engine. The boy had put the cleaned part back in place and was now trying to start it. "Grandpa said that after cleaning the heart, the machine needs some love," Ethan murmured, gently running his hand over the engine before trying to start it again. This time, the engine made a different noise, but it still didn't fully start. Ethan didn't give up. He kept trying, with impressive patience for a 6-year-old. "Robert," Jennifer said softly, "you never told me you knew this neighborhood." "Because I don't," he replied quickly. "Of course you do," Mrs. Dorothy interjected. "Robbie, don't you remember me at all? I used to make brownies for you and Walter when you worked here in the garage." "Stop calling me Robbie," Robert snapped. "My name is Robert Harrison. I'm a businessman. I have an office on Michigan Avenue." "So what?" Mrs. Dorothy shot back. "Is success a reason to be ashamed of your roots?" Jennifer looked at her husband with a mix of confusion and disappointment. "Robert, what's going on here?" Before he could answer, Ethan managed to get the engine to turn over more strongly. Everyone turned to the boy, who was beaming. "Almost. Just one little thing left," he said, examining the engine again. "What's missing?" asked old Charlie, impressed by the progress. "Grandpa said when the engine makes that noise, it means it's missing something," Ethan explained seriously. "It needs someone who knows how to talk to it the right way." "Kid, engines don't have feelings," Robert said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Yes, they do," Ethan insisted. "Grandpa said machines are like people. They need love to work right." Mrs. Dorothy was moved by her grandson's words. "Walter always said that. He said that's why some people could get any engine running and others couldn't." "Nonsense," Robert exclaimed. "Engines run on fuel, spark and compression, not with sentimentality." "Then why can't you fix it?" Ethan asked innocently. The question caught Robert off guard. He opened his mouth to answer, but couldn't come up with a satisfactory reply. "It's because you forgot how to talk to machines," Ethan continued. "Grandpa said you were the best at making an engine purr like a kitten. I never," Robert began, but his voice failed him. "Remember old Joe's chainsaw engine?" Mrs. Dorothy asked gently. "You were 13 and fixed it when no one else could. And the compressor at the paint shop," she went on. "Everyone said it was beyond repair, but you and Walter figured out it was just a clogged valve." With each memory Mrs. Dorothy brought up, Robert grew paler. His hands began to tremble visibly, and he had to lean against the wall. "Honey," Jennifer said, stepping closer to him. "Are you okay?" "I need to leave," Robert murmured. "Why are you running away?" Ethan asked, looking straight at him. "Grandpa said you were like a brother to him." "Your grandfather lied," Robert exploded. "I was never anyone's brother here." The shout echoed through the garage, leaving everyone stunned. Even Ethan stopped working on the engine and stared at Robert with wide eyes. "Robert!" Jennifer exclaimed, horrified. "How could you yell at a child like that? This child is making up stories, and all of you are putting on a show to confuse me." "No one's making anything up," Mrs. Dorothy said sadly. "You're the one who chose to forget who you were." "I chose to be someone better," Robert shouted again. "I chose not to be some poor wretch stuck tinkering in a junkyard." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Ethan looked at Robert with a heartbreaking expression of sadness. "Grandpa wasn't a poor wretch," the boy said quietly. "Grandpa was good." Those simple words hit Robert like a punch to the gut. He staggered slightly, and Jennifer had to steady him by the arm. "Maybe we should go home," she suggested softly. "Yeah," Robert agreed hoarsely. "Let's get out of this place." But as they turned to leave, the sound of hurried footsteps made them stop. A teenage girl with brown hair and a school uniform came running toward the garage. "Dad! Mom!" the girl called out. "What luck finding you here?" "Emily?" Jennifer asked, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to say thank you," the girl replied breathlessly. "I heard from Samantha that the woman who saved me lives in this neighborhood." Emily looked around until her eyes landed on Mrs. Dorothy. Immediately, she ran over and hugged the older woman tightly. "You saved my life," Emily said through tears. "I never got to thank you properly." "Sweetheart," Mrs. Dorothy replied, returning the hug. "It's so good to see you grown up and well." Robert watched the scene silently, visibly shaken. His daughter was warmly embracing the same woman he had treated with disdain just minutes before. "Dad," Emily said, stepping back from Mrs. Dorothy, "she told me you grew up in this neighborhood. Why did you never tell me about it? Robert started but couldn't continue. "Dad, are you okay? You look pale." At that moment, Ethan turned his attention back to the engine and gave it another try. The sound of the machine running for a few seconds before stalling again caught everyone's attention. "Almost there," the boy exclaimed excitedly. "It just needs one more person to help." "One more person?" old Charlie asked. "Grandpa said this engine was made for two people to work together. One takes care of the heart, the other the soul." "And who takes care of the soul?" Mrs. Dorothy asked. Ethan looked straight at Robert. "The person Grandpa taught the secrets to." All eyes turned to Robert, who seemed to be fighting an internal battle. His hands trembled and sweat dripped down his forehead despite the mild weather. "I don't know what secrets this child is talking about," he said in a shaky voice. "Oh, you do," insisted Ethan. "Grandpa told me you used to sing a special song to make the engines work." "A song?" asked Emily curiously. "Grandpa would hum a soft tune while tinkering with the engines," explained Ethan, "and Uncle Robbie would sing along." "What song was it?" Jennifer asked gently. Ethan began humming a simple, sweet melody, an old lullaby that mixed words about gears and pistons with expressions of affection. "Pretty engine, dear engine, wake up now, I'm right here. Turn slow, turn with love, and life will smile again." The melody was so familiar that Robert involuntarily moved his lips, silently following along. Mrs. Dorothy noticed immediately. "You remember," she said with a sad smile. "Walter made that song especially for the two of you." "Dad?" Emily asked, noticing her father's expression. "You know this song?" Robert was clearly wrestling with a flood of memories. His hands wouldn't stop shaking, and he seemed to struggle for breath. "Robert," Jennifer said worriedly, "sit down for a moment." She guided him to a wooden bench beside the garage. He sat heavily, burying his head in his hands. "Why are you doing this to me?" he asked in a broken voice, looking at Mrs. Dorothy. "I'm not doing anything, son," she replied gently. "I'm just reminding you of who you've always been." "I'm not your son," Robert shouted, standing abruptly. "Of course not," Mrs. Dorothy agreed calmly. "But you were like a son to me and Walter all those years." Robert began pacing, visibly agitated. "You don't understand. I built a life. I have a company. I have responsibilities." "And what's wrong with that?" Jennifer asked. "Why does success mean denying your past?" Because Robert stopped pacing and looked at everyone present. "Because no one would take me seriously if they knew I grew up tinkering in a junkyard." "Dad," Emily said softly, "I'd be proud of you no matter where you grew up. You say that now, but no, Dad. I mean it. What embarrasses me is seeing you lie about who you are." The words struck Robert like lightning. He looked at his daughter, then at his wife, and finally at Ethan, who watched the whole exchange with genuine interest. "Uncle Robert," the boy said, "Grandpa left something for you." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Dorothy opened her purse again and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Walter asked me to give this to you if you ever came back. He knew I'd come back." "He hoped," Mrs. Dorothy replied, handing him the envelope. With trembling hands, Robert took it. His name was written in Walter's familiar handwriting. He stared at it for long seconds before finally opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small golden key. "Can you read it out loud?" Ethan asked innocently. Robert hesitated, but began reading. "My dear brother Robert, if you're reading this, it means you've come home. I always knew this day would come because deep down you have a good heart, even when you try to hide it from everyone. I'm not angry that you left without saying goodbye. I understand you needed to find your own path. I just hope you found the happiness you were searching for. The key enclosed here opens a special compartment I built in the pump engine. Inside is something I've kept for you all these years, waiting for the day you'd return. If my grandson Ethan is with you when you read this, it means the time has come to pass on the knowledge we learned together. He's special, just like you were at his age. Take good care of my family, Robbie, and allow yourself to be happy again. With eternal love, your brother Walter." When Robert finished reading, tears streamed freely down his face. All his arrogance had vanished, leaving only an emotional man facing memories he'd tried to bury. "The key," Ethan whispered. "Grandpa said you'd know where to use it." Robert looked at the small golden key in his hands. Slowly, he approached the engine and searched for any hidden keyhole he might have missed. He found a small opening on the side, nearly invisible because of the rust. When he inserted the key and turned it, another compartment opened, larger than the first. From inside, Robert pulled out a small, perfectly functional miniature engine, carefully preserved. "What is that?" Jennifer asked. "The first engine Walter and I built together," Robert answered, his voice thick with emotion. "I was 12. I thought he'd thrown it away decades ago." "Grandpa never threw anything away," Ethan said seriously. "He said everything has a soul and deserves to be cared for." Robert held the miniature engine with reverence, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "We spent 3 months building this. Walter taught me every bolt, every connection." "Dad," Emily said softly, "can I see?" Robert handed the small engine to his daughter, who examined it with curiosity. "It's beautiful. It looks like a jewel." "It was our first project," Robert explained, his voice still unsteady. "Walter said if we could make this engine work, we could fix anything." "And did it work?" Jennifer asked. "Perfectly. Walter connected it to a small generator, and we powered a light bulb. It was the happiest day of my life up to that point." Ethan stepped closer to Robert with a hopeful smile. "Now can you help me with the big engine?" Robert looked at the boy, then at the pump engine, and finally at all the people watching him expectantly. The decision he made in that moment wouldn't just change the fate of the community, it would change the course of his own life. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Slowly, Robert removed his expensive jacket and carefully hung it on a nearby chair. Then he rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt and stepped toward the engine. "Ethan," he said, his voice still shaky but firmer. "Show me where the problem is." The boy beamed and pointed to different parts of the engine. "The heart is already clean and in place, but Grandpa said for it to really work, someone who loves machines needs to put their hand here." He pointed to a spot on the side, "and sing the special song." Robert hesitated for a moment, glancing around at all the expectant faces. Mrs. Dorothy gave him an encouraging smile. Jennifer held his free hand tenderly, and Emily nodded reassuringly. "All right," Robert finally said. "Let's try." He placed his hand where Ethan had pointed and began humming softly the same tune the boy had sung earlier. His voice was rough with emotion, but gradually grew clearer and more melodic. "Pretty engine, dear engine, wake up now, I'm right here." As he sang, Ethan worked on other parts of the engine, adjusting small details with the precision of someone far more experienced than his 6 years suggested. "Spin slow, spin with love, and life will smile again." Midway through the second verse, the engine gave a stronger start than all the previous attempts. Robert stopped singing for a second, surprised, but Ethan signaled for him to continue. "Piston goes up, piston goes down, a beautiful dance to see." The engine began running unevenly, making noises that suggested it was almost managing to stay on. Everyone held their breath. "Fuel is your food, tenderness your delight." As the song concluded, the engine gave one last try and finally began running steadily and smoothly. The rhythmic, regular sound indicated the water pump was working normally again. The explosion of joy was immediate. Everyone started shouting, clapping, and hugging. Ethan jumped for joy and ran to embrace Robert, who lifted him off the ground in an emotional hug. "We did it!" the boy shouted. "Grandpa was right." "Yes," Robert replied, tears streaming down his face. "Walter was always right." Mrs. Dorothy approached and hugged them both. "He would be so proud of you." Jennifer and Emily also joined the group hug, and soon the whole community was celebrating around the perfectly running engine. "Dad," Emily said when the celebration quieted down a bit, "now I understand why Mom always said you had magic hands for fixing things." "It's not magic," Robert answered, still emotional. "It's love. Walter taught me that when you love something, you can understand what it needs." "And now?" old Charlie asked. "What's going to happen to the garage?" Robert looked around the space he had threatened to demolish just hours before. The exposed brick walls, the old tools carefully hung up, the smell of oil and metal that brought back so many memories. "Nothing's going to happen," he said firmly. "Well, actually, something will. I'm going to renovate all of this." "What do you mean?" Jennifer asked. "I'm turning this place into a mechanics school for kids and teens in the community. A workshop where they can learn not just how to fix machines, but also that all honest work has value." The announcement was met with another round of cheers and applause. Ethan jumped into Robert's arms again. "And I'll be the first student?" he asked hopefully. "You'll be my special assistant," Robert replied. "After all, you already know the secrets your grandfather taught me." "Can I help too?" Emily asked. "I've always wanted to learn about engines." "Of course you can," Robert said, proud of his daughter. "We'll make this a school where anyone can learn, no matter their age or gender." Mrs. Dorothy wiped tears from her eyes. "Walter always dreamed of something like this. He said knowledge was the only thing no one could take from us." "He was right," Robert agreed. "And I spent years hiding the knowledge he gave me, as if it was something to be ashamed of." "What matters is that you remember now," Jennifer said, taking her husband's hand. "And I'm proud to know where you came from. Even though I lied about everything all these years, what matters is who you choose to be from now on," she replied. "And from what I see, you've chosen to be the man you always should have been." Robert looked again at the smoothly running engine, then at Ethan, who watched every movement of the machine with fascination, and finally at the whole community gathered around them. "You know what?" he said to Mrs. Dorothy. "Walter was right about everything. I needed to come home to find out who I really am." "And who are you?" the older woman asked with a warm smile. "I'm Robbie," he answered simply, "the boy who learned to love machines from the best mechanic in the world." From that day on, life in the Oakwood neighborhood changed completely. Robert not only cancelled the demolition plans, but also invested a considerable amount in creating Walter's Workshop, a mechanics school that quickly became a reference in the area. Ethan was indeed the first enrolled student, but soon other kids from the community joined him. Emily also became a regular visitor, discovering she had the same natural talent as her father for understanding how machines worked. Jennifer, initially reluctant about the radical change in the family's life, soon fell in love with the project. She organized fundraisers, created a scholarship system for underprivileged youth, and even learned basic mechanics. Robert's transformation was perhaps the most striking of all. The arrogant, distant man gave way to someone kind, caring, and deeply connected to his roots. He spent weekends at the workshop, teaching not just mechanical skills, but also values like respect, humility, and pride in good work. "Uncle Robert," Ethan asked one day, about 3 months after the engine incident, "how did you manage to forget all of this?" Robert stopped adjusting the tool he was using and looked thoughtfully at the boy. They were working together on restoring an old motorcycle engine someone had donated to the school. "You know, Ethan, sometimes we get so afraid of not being accepted by others that we forget who we really are," he replied. "I thought that to be respected in the business world, I had to hide where I came from." "But why?" the boy insisted. "This place is so cool." "It is," Robert agreed, "but I was afraid people would think I wasn't good enough because I grew up in a simple neighborhood." "That's silly," Ethan declared, with the innocent wisdom of children. "Grandpa always said what matters isn't where you're born, but how you treat others." "Your grandpa was very wise," Robert answered, moved. "And you're becoming just as wise as he was." At that moment, Mrs. Dorothy appeared at the workshop entrance carrying a tray of brownies and lemonade. "Snack time," she announced cheerfully. "Grandma!" Ethan exclaimed, running to hug her. "Uncle Robert taught me how to adjust a carburetor today." "How wonderful," she replied, looking proudly at her grandson and then at Robert. "Walter would be so happy to see you two working together." "Mrs. Dorothy," Robert said, stepping closer to her, "I never properly thanked you and Walter for everything you did for me when I was a boy." "Oh dear," she answered, gently touching his face. "No need to thank me. Seeing you happy again is reward enough. Even so, I want to do something special for you." "You already are," she said, pointing at Ethan, who had gone back to working on the engine. "You're looking after my grandson and honoring my husband's memory. I couldn't ask for more." "Uncle Robert," Ethan called. "Can I try starting the engine now?" "Of course," Robert replied. "But remember what I taught you." "Yes. First, check everything's in place, then turn the key slowly and wait for the engine to respond in its own time." Ethan carefully followed all the instructions. When he turned the key, the motorcycle engine roared to life immediately, purring softly like a contented cat. "I did it!" the boy shouted, jumping for joy. "Of course you did," Robert said proudly. "You've got your grandpa's natural talent." "And your uncle's too," Mrs. Dorothy added with a smile. Just then, Jennifer and Emily arrived at the workshop. Jennifer carried papers and documents, while Emily held a box of new tools. "How are my favorite mechanics?" Jennifer asked cheerfully. "Mom, you have to see this," Emily exclaimed. "Ethan got the motorcycle running." "How wonderful," said Jennifer, genuinely impressed. "Ethan, you're becoming quite the expert." "Uncle Robert taught me everything," the boy replied, looking up at Robert with admiration. "And I have some good news for you all," Jennifer continued. "The city approved our expansion project. We'll be able to build 2 new classrooms and a specialized mechanics library." "Really?" Robert asked excitedly. "Really? And there's more. 3 big companies in the area offered to partner with us. They want to hire our students once they graduate." The news was met with celebration by everyone. Walter's workshop was becoming not just a place of learning, but also a gateway to real job opportunities in the community. "Dad," Emily said, "can I talk to you in private?" "Of course, sweetheart." They stepped away from the others and sat on a small bench outside the workshop. "I wanted to tell you something," Emily began. "These last few months have been the best of my life." "How so?" "Because I finally got to know my real dad," she explained. "Before you were always distant, always worried about work and business. Now you're here, you're happy." Robert was deeply moved by his daughter's words. "Emily, I'm so sorry for all the years I was an absent father." "You don't have to apologize," she said, holding his hand. "What matters is that you've changed, and I want you to know how proud I am of you. Even knowing I grew up in a simple neighborhood and spent my childhood tinkering with engines, especially because of that," Emily exclaimed, "it's amazing to know my dad built a successful life from humble beginnings. It shows how determined and brave you are." "Thank you, sweetheart," Robert said, hugging her tightly. "That means the world to me." "And there's something else," she added with a mischievous smile. "I'm thinking of studying mechanical engineering in college." "Really? Really? I've discovered I love working with machines just as much as you do. I want to specialize and then come back to help here at the workshop." Robert was so overwhelmed he couldn't speak for a few seconds. The idea that his daughter wanted to follow in his footsteps and continue the work he and Walter had started decades ago filled him with indescribable joy. "It would be a dream come true," he finally said, "having you work here with me and Ethan." "Then it's settled," Emily said happily. "I'll apply for college this year." When they went back inside the workshop, they found a small crowd gathered. Several people from the neighborhood had come to learn about the project and enroll their own children in the classes. "Uncle Robert," Ethan called. "There's a whole bunch of people who want to learn." Robert looked around and saw children of all ages, accompanied by hopeful parents. Some families he recognized from his childhood, others were new to the area, but they all shared the same desire to give their children better opportunities. "Welcome to Walter's workshop," Robert announced loudly so everyone could hear. "Here you'll learn not just about engines and machines, but about values like honesty, dedication, and love for hard work." "How much do the classes cost?" one concerned mother asked. "They're free," Robert replied. "This workshop was created for the community, and the community can always count on it." "But how do you keep it running?" another father asked. "Through partnerships, donations, and a lot of volunteer work," Jennifer explained. "Our family believes education is a right, not a privilege." "Can anyone join?" a girl of about 8 asked. "Everyone," confirmed Robert. "Age, gender, or anything else doesn't matter. If you want to learn, we want to teach." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the following months, Walter's workshop became the beating heart of the neighborhood. Mornings were dedicated to classes for children and teens, while afternoons were reserved for vocational courses for adults looking to change careers or improve their skills. Ethan quickly stood out as one of the most promising students. At just 6 years old, he could already diagnose simple engine problems and safely use most basic tools. More importantly, he showed the same patience and care for machines that his grandfather Walter had. "Ethan," Robert said one day, "I want to show you something special." He led the boy to a section of the workshop that was always covered with a tarp. When he removed it, he revealed an old, impeccably restored engine. "It's the original water pump engine," Ethan exclaimed, recognizing it immediately. "Exactly," Robert confirmed. "After we fixed the pump and got it running with a new engine, I decided to restore this one as a tribute to your grandfather." The engine was magnificently polished, every part gleaming as if new. At the top, a small bronze plaque read, "In memory of Walter Brown, the man who taught us machines have a soul." "It's beautiful," Ethan whispered, running his hand gently over the polished metal. "And there's a surprise," Robert said with a mysterious smile. "This engine still works perfectly. Want to start it up?" Ethan's eyes lit up. Robert plugged the engine into a special electrical outlet he had installed, and when Ethan pressed the ignition button, the machine came to life with a soft, melodic hum. "Grandpa's here," the boy said with conviction. "What do you mean?" "When the engine runs, it's like Grandpa is close to us. He always said he left a little piece of his soul in every machine he fixed." Robert was deeply moved by the boy's words. There were moments when Ethan seemed to possess wisdom far beyond his 6 years, as if he truly carried a piece of Walter's soul with him. "Uncle Robert," Ethan said thoughtfully, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did it take you so long to come back? Was Grandpa sad when you left?" The question caught Robert off guard. It was something he had asked himself many times over the past months, but had never found a satisfying answer. "It's complicated, Ethan," he began. "When I was young, I thought that to be someone important in life, I had to leave here and never come back." "But why?" "Because I was ashamed," Robert admitted. "Ashamed of being poor, ashamed of not having what other kids had, ashamed of living in a simple neighborhood. And now I know I was wrong," Robert said firmly. "The most important things in life aren't money or status. It's love, friendship, and feeling useful to others." "Grandpa always said that," Ethan agreed. "He said real wealth is having people who care about you." "He was right," Robert confirmed, "and it took me 40 years to understand that." Just then, Mrs. Dorothy appeared at the workshop entrance. She visited them every day, always bringing something tasty to eat or just to check on her grandson's progress. "How are my favorite mechanics?" she asked cheerfully. "Grandma," Ethan exclaimed, "Uncle Robert showed me Grandpa's restored engine." Mrs. Dorothy stepped closer and examined the machine with eyes glistening with tears. "It's just like when Walter bought it 40 years ago," she said emotionally. "I wanted to pay a proper tribute to him," Robert explained. "Walter deserves to be remembered as the extraordinary man he was." "He would be so proud," said Mrs. Dorothy, wiping away tears, "especially seeing you and Ethan working together." "Mrs. Dorothy," Robert said, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, dear." "Was Walter really hurt when I left without saying goodbye?" Mrs. Dorothy fell silent for a few moments, clearly thinking of the best way to answer. "He was sad, yes," she finally admitted, "but not angry. Walter always said you needed to fly on your own wings to discover who you really were. Did he forgive me?" "Dear, Walter never had anything to forgive," she said tenderly. "He loved you like a brother, and true love doesn't hold grudges." "Even though I ignored him all these years?" "Even then," she confirmed. "In fact, he always knew you'd come back one day." "How could he know?" "Because he knew your heart," Mrs. Dorothy explained. "Underneath all that arrogance, Walter knew you were still the same kind boy who grew up here." Ethan, who had been listening quietly, stepped closer to Robert and took his hand. "Uncle Robert, you don't have to be sad," he said. "Grandpa is happy now." I can feel it." "How do you know?" "Because all the machines here work perfectly," the boy said seriously. "Grandpa always said when machines run smoothly, it means there's love in the air." That simple yet profound observation made Robert smile genuinely. Ethan had a unique way of seeing the world that always brought peace to his heart. "You're right," Robert said. "And you know what? I think I've finally found my place in the world." "Where?" Ethan asked curiously. "Here," Robert replied, spreading his arms to encompass the whole workshop. "Here with you all, doing what I love and helping others. Just like Grandpa did." "Just like Grandpa did," Robert confirmed. "And just like you will when you grow up." "Can I really work here when I'm older? Not just can—" "You should," Robert said seriously. "This workshop is your legacy, Ethan. It's what your grandfather left for you." "And for you too," Mrs. Dorothy added. "Walter always wanted the two of you to carry on his work together." Just then, the sound of approaching voices made them look toward the workshop entrance. Jennifer, Emily, and at least a dozen others were walking toward them. "What's going on?" Mrs. Dorothy asked. "Let's find out," Robert said, heading toward the group. As they got closer, Robert recognized Mr. Wilson, the neighborhood association president, several families from the community, and even some business people he knew from social events. "Robert," Mr. Wilson called. "Good to see you here." "Mr. Wilson," Robert greeted. "What brings you here?" "We came with a proposal for you," the association president said with an excited smile. "What kind of proposal?" "The city heard about the success of Walter's workshop and wants to make it an official partnership," Mr. Wilson explained. "They want to use this project as a model for other communities in the city." Robert was stunned. "What do you mean?" "They want to fund its expansion and create similar workshops in other neighborhoods," Mr. Wilson continued. "But on one condition: you'd have to oversee it all." "Me?" Robert asked, disbelieving. "You," confirmed one of the business people present. "Your project has caught attention not just for its technical quality, but for the human values it represents." Jennifer stepped closer to her husband, her eyes shining with pride. "Robert, this is amazing." "But would I have to leave my company?" he asked, still processing the information. "Not necessarily," replied another businessman. "We could structure this as a specialized consultancy. You'd keep your business and still coordinate the workshops." Ethan tugged at Robert's shirt. "Uncle, does that mean there'll be workshops like this one in other places?" "Looks like it, Ethan," Robert answered, bending down to the boy's level. "And can I help?" "Of course you can," said Robert, scooping the boy into his arms. "You'll be my top assistant." "Yay!" Ethan shouted, hugging Robert tightly. "So," asked Mr. Wilson, "do you accept the proposal?" Robert looked around. He saw Mrs. Dorothy smiling proudly, Jennifer and Emily waving encouragingly, Ethan waiting eagerly for his answer, and the whole group of people who had placed their hopes in him. "I accept," he said firmly, "with one condition." "What is it?" asked Mr. Wilson. "I want all the workshops to carry Walter Brown's name," said Robert. "He's the one who created the methodology we use here, and he deserves recognition." "Perfect," agreed Mr. Wilson. "Walter Brown Workshops project has a great ring to it. And there's one more condition," Robert added. "Mrs. Dorothy here will have to be the project's official consultant. She knows Walter's methods better than anyone." Mrs. Dorothy looked surprised. "Son, I'm too old for these things." "Nonsense," said Robert. "You have the experience and wisdom we need, and Ethan will need someone to teach him all the secrets he hasn't learned yet." "If that's the case, I accept," she said, moved. What followed was a spontaneous celebration. People hugged each other, children ran around shouting with joy, and even the most serious businessmen smiled, visibly pleased. "Dad," said Emily, approaching Robert, "do you realize what just happened?" "What?" "You just turned your pain into a life mission," she explained. "And you'll help hundreds of kids have the opportunities you had when you were little." Robert was moved by the thought. It was true. What had started as an attempt to redeem himself in his own eyes was becoming a project that could positively impact so many lives. "Uncle Robert," said Ethan, still in his arms, "would Grandpa be happy?" "Very happy," Robert replied with conviction. "I think this is exactly what he hoped would happen." "How do you know?" "Because everything happening here has his mark," Robert explained. "Walter always dreamed of teaching mechanics to every kid who was interested. Now that dream will come true." "And will I help at all the workshops?" "You sure will," Robert promised. You'll be my right-hand man at everyone. Even when I'm all grown up. Especially when you're all grown up, said Robert, kissing the boy's forehead, because then you'll be able to teach other kids too. Like you teach me? Like I teach you, Robert confirmed. And the cycle will go on forever. As they talked, Jennifer approached with a thoughtful look. Robert, can I suggest something? She asked. Of course. How about organizing an official launch ceremony for the project? We could invite the press, local officials, and pay a proper tribute to Walter. Great idea, Robert agreed, but I want it to be right here, at the original workshop. Why? Because this is where it all began, he explained. This is where Walter and I learned our first lessons about mechanics and about life. And this is where you found yourself again, Mrs. Dorothy added warmly. Exactly, Robert confirmed. This place is sacred to me. For me too, said Ethan seriously. It's where Grandpa is closest to us. The ceremony was scheduled for the following month. In the weeks that followed, the preparations involved the whole community. The women organized a potluck to cook. The men took charge of decorating the workshop and the surrounding streets, and the children prepared special performances to honor Walter. Ethan was given a very special task, choosing which engine would be the first to be demonstrated during the ceremony. After much thought, he decided it would be the original water pump engine, the one Robert had restored in Walter's honor. Why this one? Asked Robert curiously. Because it was the first one we fixed together, explained Ethan, and because it's the one that made you remember who you really are. You're right, Robert agreed, moved by the boy's maturity. It's the perfect engine to represent our story. On the day of the ceremony, over 200 people gathered at the workshop and in the surrounding streets. There were neighbors, city officials, business owners, journalists, and even families from other parts of town who were interested in the project. Robert was nervous, not because he was afraid of public speaking, years of business experience had prepared him for that, but because this day meant so much more than just launching a project. It marked the end of a 40-year chapter and the beginning of a new phase in his life. Uncle Robert, said Ethan, holding his hand. Are you scared? A little, Robert admitted. What about you? Me too, the boy confessed. But Grandma said when we do something out of love, we don't have to be afraid. Your grandma is right, Robert agreed. And we're doing all this out of love, aren't we? Yeah, Ethan confirmed with a smile. Out of love for Grandpa, out of love for machines, and out of love for the other kids who'll get to learn. When it was time for the main presentation, Robert stepped onto a small platform set up in front of the workshop. Ethan stood beside him, wearing a miniature jumpsuit Mrs. Dorothy had sewn especially for the occasion. Dear friends, Robert began, his voice carrying through the simple sound system they'd set up. A few months ago, I was a completely different man. I was arrogant, distant from my family, and I'd completely forgotten where I came from. It was this extraordinary boy, he said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder, who taught me it's never too late to remember who we really are. He told the whole story, how he'd grown up in the neighborhood, his friendship with Walter, the years of separation, and finally, his reconnection with his roots through the wisdom of a 6-year-old. The Walter Brown Workshops project isn't just a program to teach mechanics, Robert explained. It's a tribute to the values my brother Walter taught me, that everyone deserves opportunities, that knowledge should be shared, and that love and respect are the most important tools we have. The audience listened in respectful silence. Many were visibly moved, especially those who had known Walter personally. Now, Robert said, I'd like you to meet my partner in this project. He knelt to Ethan's height and handed him the microphone. Hi everyone, Ethan said in a clear, confident voice. My name is Ethan. I'm 6 years old, and my grandpa Walter was the best mechanic in the world. Affectionate laughter spread through the crowd. Grandpa always said machines are like people. They need care to work right, Ethan continued, and that the most important thing isn't being the smartest, but being kind to everyone. That's why Uncle Robert and I are going to teach every kid who wants to learn, and when they grow up, they'll teach other children. That way, Grandpa will always be here, even if he's not with us. The simplicity and sincerity of Ethan's words deeply moved everyone present. Many couldn't hold back their tears. Now, said Ethan, handing the microphone back to Robert, let's show how the first engine works. Robert and Ethan walked together to Walter's restored engine. In front of the crowd, they repeated the ritual that had marked the beginning of their partnership. Robert placed his hand on the side of the engine while Ethan adjusted the controls. Together they began humming the special song Walter had taught them decades before. Pretty engine, dear engine, wake up now, for I am here. Turn slow, turn with love, and life will smile again. When the engine roared to life with its familiar purr, the crowd erupted in enthusiastic applause, but more than that, many openly wept, moved by the symbolic beauty of the moment. This engine, Robert said as the applause faded, represents everything the Walter Brown Workshops project aims to achieve. It ran for 40 years serving the community, stopped for a while, but with love and dedication, it's running better than ever. That's exactly what we want to do for our children and youth. Give them the tools to build prosperous and happy lives no matter where they were born or what hardships they face. The rest of the ceremony included demonstrations of other equipment, presentations by the workshop's first students, and speeches from officials and business leaders supporting the project. But the most memorable moment came when Mrs. Dorothy was called to the stage. This woman, Robert said, was crucial in helping me remember who I truly am. She is the widow of Walter Brown, the woman who raised the most special grandson in the world, and our official project advisor. Mrs. Dorothy stepped onto the stage with Robert and Ethan's help. At 68, she radiated remarkable energy and dignity. My husband Walter, she said, her voice trembling, always believed education was the only true legacy we could leave our children. He used to say it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, born in a palace or a slum. What matters is having the chance to learn and the determination to use that knowledge to help others. So, she continued, in Walter's name, and for all the children who will benefit from this project, I officially declare the Walter Brown Workshops open. The celebration that followed lasted late into the night. There was music, dancing, plenty of delicious food prepared by the women of the community, and a contagious sense of joy. Ethan, despite his age, stayed awake until the very end, soaking in every moment of that special evening. To him, this wasn't just the launch of a project. It was the certainty that his grandfather's memory would live on through the work he and Robert would do together. Uncle Robert, Ethan said as they finally packed up the equipment, today was the best day of my life. Why? Because I felt like Grandpa was here with us the whole time, the boy explained. When you sang the special song, when the engine started, when everyone clapped, I felt like he was smiling. Robert lifted Ethan into his arms, deeply moved by the boy's words. You know what? I felt the same way. Is Grandpa proud of us? I'm sure he is, Robert replied. And if he could talk to us now, do you know what he'd say? What? He'd say we're the perfect team, and together we'll make all his dreams come true. Even the hardest ones? Especially the hardest dreams, confirmed Robert. Because when two people who love each other work together for a just cause, nothing is impossible. Ethan fell asleep in Robert's arms as they finished organizing the workshop. When Mrs. Dorothy came to pick up her grandson, she found Robert sitting in a chair, holding the sleeping boy and watching Walter's engine, which continued to run smoothly. Let me take him, whispered Mrs. Dorothy. It's all right, Robert replied softly. Let me take you both home. Are you sure? I am, he confirmed, standing up carefully so as not to wake Ethan. After all, we're family now. The simple yet meaningful statement made Mrs. Dorothy smile. That was exactly what Walter had always wished for, that Robert would one day come home and discover that family isn't just about sharing the same blood, but about choosing to share the same love. On the way to Mrs. Dorothy's house, Robert reflected on everything that had happened over the past few months. The transformation had been so radical that sometimes he still struggled to believe it was real. Mrs. Dorothy, he said when they arrived at her building, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. How was Walter so wise? Did he go to some special school? Mrs. Dorothy chuckled softly. Walter only studied up to the 4th grade, but his wisdom came from something much deeper than books. How so? It came from love, she explained simply. Walter loved people. He loved machines. He loved life. And when you truly love something, you understand its needs and know how to care for it. Is that why he was so good with engines? And with people too, Mrs. Dorothy confirmed. He knew how to listen, how to observe, and most of all, he knew everyone needs to feel valued. I want to be like him, Robert said sincerely. You already are, Mrs. Dorothy replied, stroking Ethan's face as he continued to sleep in Robert's arms. Look how much this boy trusts you, how much he loves you. That doesn't happen by chance. I love this boy as if he were my own son, Robert admitted, and he loves you as if you were his father, said Mrs. Dorothy. Walter always knew you two needed each other. How could he know? Because Walter understood that love has no limits of time or distance, she explained. He knew that sooner or later, you'd find each other again and become a family. When they finally reached Mrs. Dorothy's apartment, Robert helped tuck Ethan into bed. The boy woke for a few seconds, just long enough to hug Robert and whisper, "Good night, Uncle. Thank you for the best day of my life." "Thank you, Ethan," Robert replied, kissing the boy's forehead. "For teaching me it's never too late to come home." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story. Do you believe Robert made the right choice by letting go of his arrogance and embracing his humble roots? What lessons about family, forgiveness, and second chances moved your heart the most? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think about Robert's journey of transformation and little Ethan's special wisdom. Don't forget to like if the story touched you, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories celebrating the power of love and redemption.